Betty Boop was known for her oversized doe eyes, her exaggerated facial expressions, her baby-style voice, and her curvaceous body. But perhaps the most iconic thing about her was her signature "oop oop a doop." But did she originate from a white woman or a black woman, or should I say a young black child? Well, in today's video, I am going to present to you the facts, clear up misinformation, and reveal the real Betty Boop. So will the real Betty Boop please stand up? Hello, my name is Tammy and welcome back to my channel. So who was Betty Boop? Betty Boop was an animated cartoon designed by Graham Natwick at the request of David Fleischer. She originally appeared in the Talkertoon and Betty Boop film series, which were produced by Fleischer Studios and released by Paramount Pictures. She was featured in the 90 theatrical cartoons between 1930 and 1939. She's also been featured in comic strips and mass merchandising. She was a caricature of the jazz age flapper. Betty Boop was described in 1934 as being known for her childish appearance mixed with sophistication. Her features consisted of a large round baby face with big eyes and a nose like a button. Framed in a somewhat coiffure, which was her cute little hairstyle, some may consider it little pixie curls, 1920s kiss curls, and sometimes people even portray her with body waves. A hairstyle that was very popular in the 1920s, popular in the 90s, and is starting to make a comeback today. Although she was toned down in the mid-1930s as a result of the Hays Code, which was a set of guidelines for self-censorship and to regulate moral content. So basically they toned Betty Boop down for her to appear more demure. And she became one of the world's best known and most popular cartoon characters. Betty Boop made her first appearance in the cartoon Dizzy Dishes, released on August 9, 1930. Inspired by her popular performing style, but not by any one specific person, the character was originally created as a French poodle, so she at first was a dog. Within a year, Betty made the transition from an incidental human canine breed to a completely human female character. Her floppy poodle ears became her hoop earrings, and her black poodle nose became her little button nose. Now, Betty was voiced by many different people. Betty was first voiced by Margie Hines. Later, several different voice actresses performed the role, including Katie Wright, Bunny Poe, Anne Rothschild, also known as Little Ann Little, and especially Mae Questrell. Returning nearly 50 years later in Disney's Who Framed Roger Rabbit in 1988, today Betty is and has been voiced by Cindy Robinson since 2015. So why was Betty Boop so popular? Well, you have to take into account time, the era. So Betty Boop originated in the 1930s, and during this time, women dressed very moderately. Women were seen as domestic, seen as homemakers and caretakers. And then we have Betty Boop popping onto the scene in her little short red dress, her little cute little pixie hairstyle, her hoop earrings, her curvaceous body. She was overtly sexy. She was something different, something very unique and very fresh. And she was a sex symbol. She is a sex symbol of the Depression era and a reminder of the more carefree days of the jazz age flappers. Her popularity was drawn largely from adult audiences, and the cartoons, while seemingly surreal, contained many sexual and psychological elements, particularly in the 1932 Talkertoon Minnie the Moocher featuring Cab Calloway and his orchestra. So Betty Boop was very unique amongst the other cartoon characters around her time. Let's take Minnie Mouse, for example. A lot of other cartoon characters, female cartoon characters, had a regular shaped body, or they had the same shaped body as their husband. For example, Minnie kind of had the same shaped body as Mickey Mouse. The only difference is they put a bow on her head and she had a female voice. But her body was very normal, very regular. It was not sexy. Betty Boop, on the other hand, had a mature womanly adult body. She wore a short dress, she wore high heels, she even wore a garter on her thigh. And her dress showed her cleavage, which was always highlighted because her dress was low cut and contoured to her body. So, of course, a lot of men gravitated towards Betty Boop. A lot of women were interested in Betty Boop because she was so different. So much so that in the cartoons, there would be times where she was getting dressed and a man was peeking at her while she was trying to change clothes or just go about her day. And looking back on it, a lot of it was inappropriate. In the cartoon Betty Boop's Bamboo Owl, where she does the hula wearing nothing but a lei, strategically placed to cover over her breasts, and a grass skirt. And if you look at her head shape, it is similar to the shape of a baby or a small child, and very big in proportion to her body. And of course, this suggested the combination of girlishness and maturity that many people saw in the flapper type during this time. There's also a thing with women during this time and even into the 50s where women that had very womanly and curvaceous bodies, but also embodied a very innocent or a very childlike nature about them were very popular. Marilyn Monroe was also known for her combination of innocence and maturity. So back to why Betty Boop was so popular. It is because she was different. She was alternative. She was literally in a lane of her own, which led to her increasing popularity. So who was Betty Boop based off of? Well, now we're about to get into some things. Well, according to the Fleischer Studios animators, Betty Boop's appearance and voice were influenced by or inspired by Helen Kane. Helen Kane was born August 4th, 1904. She was an American singer and actress known for her song, I Want to Be Loved by You. So Helen Kane was a popular performer during the 1920s, known for her distinctive style of singing in which she sang and performed in a girlish manner and her signature boo-oop-a-doop and distinctive voice. Kane was also known for blending several fashionable styles of the late 1920s. These included scat singing. Now, what scat singing or scatting is kind of like the boo-oop-a-doop when you kind of use your voice to make sounds instead of words inside of a song to kind of fill in the spaces of a song. So kind of just making sounds with your voice instead of using words and actual lyrics. So Helen Kane was known for this and also blending singing and speech. And like I said, this was very popular in the 1920s. Kane's career break came in 1927 when she appeared in a musical called A Night in Spain. It ran from May 3rd through November 12th, 1927 for a total of 174 performances at the 44th Street Theater in New York City. But it wasn't until she sang That's My Weakness Now, when she added the scat lyrics boo-oop-a-doop, that her career and her name skyrocketed and her name was in lights. She became so popular that she began headlining, sometimes making $5,000 a week. Now, $5,000 a week is a lot of money today, so I can only imagine how much money that was when she was making that in the 1920s. So her career really took off from here. Her act and her branding became really, really popular. She even recorded an EP of 4 songs with the album titled The Ba-Oop-a-Doop Girl. So of course, others and herself started to notice the similarities between her and Betty Boop. So much so that a comparison of her and Betty Boop was published in Photoplay's April 1932 issue where they pointed out the similarities. And Helen Kane believed that her image and her likeness was ripped off, that she filed a lawsuit against the Fleischer brothers, Fleischer Studios, and Paramount for damages of $250,000 equivalent to $4.7 million in 2020. So a lot of money back then. Alleging infringement, unfair competition, and exploitation of her personality and her image. The trial lasted for about 2 weeks and took place in April and early May of 1934. Helen Kane claimed that Betty Boop was of her total likeness and that she originated the boo-oop-a-doop signature catchphrase. So looking at Helen Kane and Betty Boop, it should be an open and shut case. They are very similar, almost the same exact type and brand. They have the signature boo-oop-a-doop, signature style. So This should be very obvious that they ripped off Helen Kane's image. Well, this is where Helen Kane messed up because you cannot sue someone for stealing material that you stole. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, the case was thrown out, and Helen Kane ended up losing the lawsuit because it was claimed in the court case that Helen Kane stole or appropriated the style from another performer named Baby Esther, an African American child performer from the 1920s. Now, who the heck is Baby Esther? Well, Baby Esther was a big deal. Baby Esther was an African American child performer. She could sing and speak different languages. She was known for being acrobatical, animated. She was performing as a child from around the ages of 7 to 10, is what was reported. So Baby Esther, sometimes who went by Little Esther, and Little Esther was reportedly born in Chicago and was active from about 1923 to 1934. Esther had arrived in New York for the first time in mid-1928, playing in a pocket-sized nightclub called the Everglades. Now remember the nightclub, the Everglades. It was said that she was known for impersonating another popular performer who also began performing as a child, Lawrence Mills, who was an American cabaret singer, dancer, and comedian, who was another vaudeville singer. Now, what vaudeville singing is, or what a vaudeville act is, it kind of incorporates comedy, singing, acting, ballet, dancing, acrobats, comical and dramatic situations, even poetry. And it can have psychological or moral intentions inside of the acts. The way I kind of think of it is kind of like a variety show performed by one person. So if you ever can see a vaudeville show or this type of show, it's very, very fascinating. So back to Baby Esther. Baby Esther started her career as a Charleston dancer and became a trained dancer. She could also tap dance. Like I said, she was heavy into acrobatics. Her body type was she's very small, but very muscular, very limber. She sung the blues and jazz songs. Esther was very popular in Europe and South America, so she was known and popular in the United States, but she usually toured overseas and was more popular over there. And that's perhaps why we don't have enough or a lot of information about Baby Esther. So to kind of give you a visual, she was kind of compared to the Black version of Shirley Temple, and she was also called a miniature Josephine Baker. And if you know Josephine Baker and the way she performed, just imagine that explosive energy in the form of a little child. So one might say, what does Helen Kane, a grown woman, adult performer, have anything to do with a 7 to 10-year-old child performer? How are their performances even similar? How do their performances even coincide? How is this grown woman being compared to this little child performer? How is this even possible? Well, according to Baby Esther's manager, Lou Bolton, at the time, he stated that one night when Baby Esther was performing at the club The Everglades, that Helen Kane was there. He stated that he did not know the exact time in which she arrived, but he did see her there and they had a conversation afterwards. So this is what he claimed in the court case. And Lou Bolton knew Helen Kane because at one point he was also her manager. And it was said that shortly after this performance, Helen Kane started using the bettyboop catchphrase in her act. Did Helen Kane copy Baby Esther? Well, think about Betty Boop for a second. Think about her mannerisms, her childlike innocence, her seductiveness, her distinctive voice. Think about the different characteristics that make up Betty Boop. Now, as you visualize Betty Boop, let me give you some of the characteristics of Baby Esther. Now, we know she was a child performer around the ages of 7 to 10, so already there's a childlike thing. So when Baby Esther performed, they said she specialized in B and D sounds, which consists of things like boop, doop, wooda, doodah. Now, although there is no known footage of Baby Esther, from reports in magazines and from people that knew of her performances and her act, this is how they described her. They said her voice was very distinctive and flute like. And in her act, she danced, she did acrobatics, she made funny faces where she rolled her eyes and made different facial expressions. Of course, she did the scatting. They said that she gave off a seductive mixture of seriousness and childish mischief. They said her body, in the way she danced, it looked like her body played above her hips and that she moved or danced as if she didn't need legs. They said that she was a strong, muscular performer, very gay and winsome. And one of the biggest things that she was known for was her signature catchphrase. They said that she would often use to end her show was the ba doop catchphrase. So if you think about Betty Boop and you think about the characteristics of Baby Esther, very cohesive, very similar. So going back to Helen Kane and what does her performance have to do with Baby Esther? Well, if you look at the way Helen Kane performed and you look at Betty Boop, you should be able to see how, if indeed it is true that Helen Kane witnessed a performance of Baby Esther, how she could have taken those elements and those characteristics of Baby Esther and applied it to her already act to make it even more unique, to make it even more appealing. What it looks like to me is she saw Baby Esther in the club and saw how exciting and unique her act was. And prior to this, it was said that Helen Kane was not that popular. Her act was not doing that well. And she did not skyrocket until she used the ba-oop ba-doop catchphrase or scatting in her music. And as it was reported in court, the recordings of Baby Esther using that catchphrase, those performances were performed before Helen Kane first ever performed it, which gives more weight to Helen Kane did indeed steal this from Baby Esther. And also, if you look at Helen Kane's mannerisms when she performs, it just looks like something a child would do from the way she's sitting, from the way she's holding her head, from her mannerisms. It all looks very childlike. So the thing is, this Betty Boop controversy has been going on for a very long time. The thing is, none of us were there. We don't know everything about this situation and how it transpired. All I can do is present to you what was actually reported and research from actual court cases, actual reports. The rest of it is my opinion and my belief of what happened from me analyzing the situation. And from analyzing the situation, who do I believe should be credited as the real Betty Boop or the originator of the Betty Boop likeness and style? Well, from what I have presented to you, from what I have read, I'm going to go with Baby Esther on the strength of a lot of times things like this happen and is swept under the rug. But it goes back to the saying, what's done in the dark will come out in the light. From what was presented, I believe that Helen Kane was influenced by Baby Esther. And what are the reasons in which why I believe that? Well, number one, I've already explained to you the mannerisms and the characteristics of Baby Esther inside of her act, and how it relates to Helen Kane and her act, and how it relates to Betty Boop. So that for number one. Number two, scatting, which was the ba-doop-a-doop type sounds, came and originated from African American culture. Said to have been originated from West African tradition and New Orleans. It was also said that the trumpeter Louis Armstrong was one of the first to record scatting in one of his songs. In his 1926 track, EBGBs. Number three, historically, a lot of African American artists had their work stolen throughout history. You can take rock and roll, for example, where they would have the black artist singing the songs, but have the white artist lip singing it, and they would have the white artist on the cover of the albums giving them the credit. And just throughout history, you've just seen many examples of a black artist being taken advantage of in this way. You can even bring it to current day. For example, TikTok. When TikTok first started, there were a lot of African American dancers that made TikTok popular, and they were making up these very creative dances that white artists were copying but they were getting the credit and the accolades and all of these opportunities for work that they didn't even create. They were getting invited onto TV shows, talk shows, for dances that African American artists created. The fourth reason why I side with Baby Esther over Helen Kane is because people steal content all the time. You can say maybe back then this was a race issue. I do think that has something to do with it. I do think Helen Kane thought that she could take this from this little black girl and that nobody would know. Doesn't mean she meant to be malicious. Doesn't mean that she meant to harm or hurt anyone. I think that she liked what she saw. She was inspired and she wanted to jazz up her act that was not as popular. And I think that she thought that no one would know, it wouldn't be a big deal. And during this time, African Americans did not have access to opportunities, did not have access to equal rights. Probably was a common thing to do this, and it was not a big deal to a lot of people. But like I said, people stealing content is a people issue. People do it all the time. A lot of artists take from other artists, and there should be more ways to protect people's creativity and their art. Me personally, I've had my content stolen, even on this platform, on YouTube, when I did this particular video on Donna Drake. I was probably, I think, the first person to do a full-length video on Donna Drake, and a bigger creator appeared to have ripped off my content, added a couple of pictures, some commentary, and voila, got millions of views. It took me days to compile all that information and to put it in a video, and to see someone take from it and it just blow up is not cool. And thank you to everyone that watched and supported my video and called it out as well. So back to Helen Kane, I think she just wanted to advance her career. I think she saw an opportunity and she just went for it. And it was reported that during this time, Helen Kane was in financial ruin. She was dealing with some financial issues. And it was also stated that during this trial, this case, Baby Esther did not testify or have anything to do with this case. Baby Esther was kind of, like I said, not as popular in the United States. And she only resurfaced because her name was brought up in this case. It was stated that the manager was paid off by the Fleischer brothers to help strengthen their case to win against Helen Kane. I don't know. I just know when I saw in the case, they did show footage of Baby Esther and showing her different mannerisms that looked like the Betty Boop. That's where I was like, okay, that should be substantial evidence. But one of the reasons I decided to do this video, because there's so much misinformation when it comes to this topic. You can Google the real Betty Boop or the black Betty Boop, and you're going to see inaccurate information and inaccurate photos. And you have to really dig through all of that to even get to just a little bit of the truth. A lot of the misinformation comes from these photos that people are stating is the black Betty Boop. This is not Esther Jones. This is a Russian model named Oya Gussie who was cosplaying Betty Boop. But if you Google Betty Boop, the black Betty Boop, you will see this picture floating around. The second picture you're going to see floating around is of this woman who was said to be the older version of Baby Esther or Esther Jones. This is not Baby Esther. This was said to be a photo from James Vanderzee, and the photo is of an unidentified woman. And then the other types of misinformation you may see, there's another singer named Esther Phillips, who's very popular as well. She was also African American. When you look up Betty Boop or the black Betty Boop, you will see people are saying that Esther Phillips is Baby Esther. This is not Baby Esther or Betty Boop, or it does not have any correlation. The biggest pet peeve with this case is that people, when they heard that Betty Boop was black, they just ran with it. They start copying and pasting pictures. The truth is, most likely, from what I believe, is that Helen Kane did rip off a lot of Baby Esther's characteristics to help make her character pop and as popular as it was. So I do think that Baby Esther should be credited with royalties from Betty Boop, who became widely successful and was widely popular. But I think it's also very triggering for Black people to see stories about a black artist being ripped off or a black artist having their content stolen, because so much throughout history it has happened so many times. And to this day, every other week, every other month, we're finding out, oh, this inventor was actually black. Oh, this was actually founded by a black person. Oh, a black person did this in history. We're still finding out different things about our culture and history. And it's very discouraging because so many things were taken from us. So it is very triggering, which is why I think that there's a lot of misinformation. A lot of people are just running with the title and not doing the research. Whether you believe that Helen Kane should be credited with Betty Boop or Baby Esther, whichever side that you decide to go with, either way, we need to use the right information, and we at least need to use the right photos of Baby Esther. Because although there is no known footage of Baby Esther, I really do think that her act was something amazing, especially for her to perform overseas. And when it comes to this topic, there are a lot of people that say that Betty Boop was indeed based off Helen Kane, and that Baby Esther had nothing to do with Betty Boop because she's only associated with the catchphrase. But that's not true. She was also associated with her distinctive voice and the mannerisms and the funny faces and the pointing to the chin and looking up with the big eyes. That was said to all have come from Baby Esther. And how can you say that Baby Esther has nothing to do with Betty Boop? When you think about Betty Boop, the things that are most iconic or what Betty Boop is known for is her childlike innocence, her maturity, her facial expressions, and her popular catchphrase. And if indeed Helen did take those things from Baby Esther, then Baby Esther has a lot to do with Betty Boop. And Baby Esther and her family should be getting royalties from Betty Boop. In conclusion, the one thing that I thought about most after I researched for this video was Baby Esther. I really wanted to see her performance because I feel like if we could get a clip or some footage of her performance, we could clearly see if she indeed was the true inspiration for Betty Boop. But I also wanted to know more about Baby Esther because she was this grand child performer. She was exhilarating. They describe her performance as so exciting. They stated in some articles it looked like she was in total amusement with herself. It was even stated in one report that when a reporter asked her if she was bored with performing, she looked up and said, "Why?" So it seemed like she did not realize the weight that she held, that these people in all these different countries were coming out to see her and were fascinated by her. Now, it was also said at different times she was a child. She did not want to perform, and when she was not performing, she was playing with her dolls. So she was still very much a child that loved performing, but like any typical child, I'm pretty sure there were times where performing was not so fun. It just fascinated me that a child from the ages of 7 to 10 was performing to this magnitude and gaining this type of crowd and attention. And I'll say it once again, at one point she was the highest paid child performer. Now, it was said that Baby Esther at some point in her early to mid-teens stopped performing, and she just kind of disappeared. No one knows what actually happened to her or the aftermath of her performing. They said it kind of just fizzled out. And no one knows what happened to Baby Esther after the fact, or when she passed away, or if she was still alive at some point, or if she has any surviving family members. And also somewhere it was also said that the boop boop a doop sound was actually originated and used first by another African American singer, Gertrude Saunders. This story has many layers, and as you get deeper and deeper into the facts and into the truth, you unravel other things and you can go down a serious rabbit hole. I think what's so brilliant about this case is that Betty Boop was and is a star, an icon. And in the midst of learning about the origins of Betty Boop, in the case with Helen Kane and the Fletcher Studios, we uncovered a star, Baby Esther, who, if this case had not happened, might have been completely forgotten about. So now I have presented you all with the information, and I have given you my opinion, my take on who I think should be credited with the originality of Betty Boop. But who do you all think should be credited as the originator or the influence of Betty Boop? So let's continue this conversation in the comments section. And if you like this video and others like it, and if you found this video valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching. And just like always, I will see you all in the next one.